mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my strength and redeemer.
Amen.
There are times on days like this where I guess I'm supposed to say happy birthday. But that seems kind of strange to me. We didn't say happy birthday when we witnessed the birth of Jesus. We didn't say happy birthday when he died and rose again. We didn't say happy birthday to one another as we entered this building this morning. How come the church didn't start when Jesus was born, the Christian church? Why didn't it start when Jesus was born? Why did it wait till 50 days after he had died and risen? Our gospel lesson today takes place in some writings. It takes place in the same room that we had the Last Supper. And do you remember what Jesus did on that night in the Last Supper? He said, "Peace I give you." And he gave us that new commandment to love one another as he had loved us. To love our neighbors as ourselves. And he returns a week later. And the disciples once again are gathered in that same room. And again they're in fear. And Jesus says, "Peace. My peace I give you." Jesus ascends into heaven. He ascends to the right hand of the Father. And he says we will not be alone, because he sends us this advocate, this Holy Spirit. Now, let's see where we're going. Open your prayer books, please. Page 852. Page 852 in the Catechism of the Church. There's this question about who is the Holy Spirit? How is the Holy Spirit revealed in the Old Covenant? How is the Holy Spirit revealed in the New Covenant? How do we recognize the presence of the Holy Spirit in our lives? I'm going to stand here today and tell you, at some point, take a glance down through, refresh yourselves with all of those teachings of the church on the Holy Spirit. But for me, Pentecost, there's a definition that says that Pentecost is basically, it's the 50th day after the death and resurrection, or after the resurrection of Jesus. It's 50 days after Easter. But I love the question in the Catechism of how do we recognize the presence of the Holy Spirit in our lives? Give you a second to think about that, because that can be a really tough question. And it can be a painful question sometimes. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that the first time that I can really remember seeing that there's something very real about this whole Holy Spirit thing was back in December of '95. My dad was laying in the hospital. He'd kind of been in and out of it all day long, and the doctors had finally gathered the family and said, "We need to talk about hospice." Dad was the only one in the room that didn't want to talk about hospice. But having spent all day with him, he got to about 8:45 at night. Now, picture this in a small hospital room. I have 3 brothers, a sister. And we're all kind of sitting around and doing whatever we can to be with Dad. And all of a sudden, my dad, laying there in the bed, looks over at my oldest brother and goes, "Well, that's kind of strange." So my brother went over and was sitting with my dad, and they were holding hands for a minute, and finally my dad goes, he was shaking hands with my brother Chuck. Chuck went back over and took his chair, and my dad looks at my other brother and goes, and he went this way throughout the whole family. You see, I learned that night something that I took with me during internships at Spectrum Hospital and other places where I've been. I believe that the Holy Spirit visits us sometimes shortly before we're getting ready to be called home. Shortly before we die. And I think the Holy Spirit assures us that we're going to be okay. And then I also believe it's up to us to pass that reassurance to others. And that's exactly what happened with my dad that night. He lay there, he shook our hands, we gave him a hug, and there was just this look over his face. He was at peace. He knew his time had come, and he was at peace. And he was reassuring the rest of us. And I think that you, in many times, can think of an incident like that in your lives where that Spirit washed over you and washed over a loved one of yours. I was assured that night by watching Dad that, you know what, there really was something to all this church stuff. There really was a Holy Spirit, and you know what, we'd be okay. I wanted to find out more. Of course, 20 years later, when Mom got ready to go, she lay there, said her goodbyes, and then she asked this question. How's Jordan Spieth doing? Jordan Spieth, a young golfer, it was Masters Week last year. She wanted to know how he was doing. She wanted to get out of bed and go play golf. That question in the catechism, what does it look like to be filled by the Holy Spirit to us? What is it like to have that Spirit present? There are people in this room who sat back or stood a couple of weeks ago and packed bags of toothbrushes for the pantry. Where is the Spirit when you're doing that manual labor, that work kind of stuff? That Spirit is right there, bag after bag after bag, filling that need that somebody else might remain a little bit healthier because of what we did. Pushing, you got people like Kevin who was pushing the carts through the pantry, letting people pick their meals for the next couple of weeks. Where's the Spirit when that happens? Besides watching the smiles, the joy, the thank yous that people give. That's what the Spirit looks like. And I'm going to leave you by asking you that same question that we had back here on page 852 once again, because At the very beginning of this chapter of John is one of the stories that we sometimes use in memorials. That 14th chapter of John goes, "Do not let your hearts be troubled. Believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house there are many dwelling places. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go to prepare a place for you?" And it continues down where he gets challenged by Thomas, and he gets challenged by Philip. "Show us the Father. I've been with you this long and you still don't know?" Very truly I tell you, the one who believes in me will also do the works that I do. In fact, will do greater works than these. That question again. How do you recognize the presence of the Holy Spirit in your life? As a clergy person in the diocese, I'm required by the bishop, and whether he required me to do it or not, I think it's been a wonderful experience. But once a month I sit with a trained spiritual director, and the first question is always, "Where's the Spirit been leading you this month? How did you experience the Spirit? Where's the Spirit taking you? What's going on at Holy Trinity? What are you doing out there?" They're just questions that sometimes we need to ask ourselves. What are we doing? How is the Spirit present in our lives? How do we recognize Him? Do we recognize Him? Is the Holy Spirit leading us to do anything? Is she helping us fill needs in our community? Or is she just making us comfortable in our own little world? Where does she lead us? How do we recognize her? How do we recognize the presence of the Spirit every day?